Hello and welcome to another exciting episode of Triple Tap. This is episode number 37. Guys, welcome. Lance, Kent, how are you both this evening? Can you believe we've done up to 37 episodes of Triple Tap? Where has the
it's huge. It's huge and it is exciting.
It is exciting. And guys, if you're listening, we appreciate you being here. Before I ask the guys how their week's been, just be interactive in the chat for us. Give us a score of 1 to 10, how excited you are in being here, because I know some of you have been following Triple Tap for a while now, and you're here week after week after week, enjoying these shows with us. And we love having you guys here with us as we interview a range of speakers across a range of industries and a range of topics. And some of them have been a little bit controversial and a little bit heated, but that's okay. We're here to ask some hard questions every now and then. So Kent, Lance, how's your week been, guys? Who'd like to go first this week?
Oh, I'd love to go first. But I'll start with a question. Have we changed that intro?
No, that's the original intro.
Wow, it always struck me as being a lot more police violence, but maybe I'm just getting used to seeing that sort of level of police presence these days. So I don't know. I've had a great week though. So looking forward to this interview.
Excellent. And we got a lot of good stuff coming up tonight when we introduce our guest in just a moment. What about you, Kent? You're always busy, I know.
Oh, look, all three of us are, Ainsley, and the amount of work that you get through during every week. I mean, you always give Lance and I a rap and say how busy we are, but the fact is we know how busy you are. We know the work that you get done, and we totally appreciate and are very, very grateful for everyone who's working in TAP, the admins, everyone, the executives, and all of the groups that are reaching out now to join with us in the communities, the Awake groups, the Stand in the Park groups. It's starting to come together. It's fantastic.
It sure is really, really exciting. And we certainly wouldn't be who we are today without the support of all of those people in all those various areas. So I'm excited to be here and excited to be introducing our guest tonight. So let me go ahead without, here we go. We are actually we have interviewed this man before, but not on Triple Tap. I think we did an impromptu Zoom at one time, but we'd like to welcome Pastor Paul to this Zoom. He is a minister of religion, a bard, an environmentalist, a paralegal, and a human rights advocate. He was born in Bishop's Stortford, Essex in England, and he migrated from England to South Australia with his parents and his young brother and sister when he was around 11 and a half years old. And after completing matriculation in high school in Adelaide, South Australia, he started his working life at 16 as an electronic technician with a foundation in fundamental electronics, communication and computing. And after 4 years of training and following a life-changing significant health event, Paul gave up everything to pursue his love of music. He moved from Adelaide, South Australia to Sydney and became a professional musician and has continued with his passion for music over the last 35 years. After many years of performing and not long after the passing of his grandmother around the year 2000, he began an applied theological practice, Advaita Vedanta, hopefully I pronounced that right, that aimed at illuminating the common ground between all religions and spiritual practices. And in 2004, he was initiated into the Holy Ramakrishna Order, and from this time forward dedicated his life to pastoral work, selfless service, and using his musical skills in new and creative ways to help and empower and educate people. In 2016, he became more active in the protection of God-given common law, constitutional and fundamental human rights, especially in regards to children, and began assisting families with pastoral support and advocacy. And currently he heads 3 important cases, including the pending challenge by Dr. Russell Pridgeon, for whom he won his medical license to practice medicine back from APRA in Brisbane on February the 8th, 2000. That's when the court case is, February the 8th, 2023. So ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, please give a warm welcome to Pastor Paul Burton to the call this evening. So Pastor Paul, if you're there, please turn on your camera.
I am here.
Excellent.
Thank you, Ainsley. Yeah, you need the sound of an applause. When I used to play live gigs, I used to hit this little thing and went,
I wish I could, and I hope that our guests here are going to drop some comments in the chat there to welcome you to the call. But Pastor Paul, you sent us a couple of videos to have a look, and I just want to read a couple of things from that, which will lead into you maybe starting to give us a bit of an insight into what you're currently working on. For the last 230 years, this only happened in Australia if you're an Aboriginal, that is an Aboriginal as defined by law. But what we saw on that video, it doesn't matter what colour your skin is. In New South Wales, Australian Family and Community Services can abduct your child from you by enlisting the New South Wales Police Force with no evidence proven in any court of law and no opportunity for you to challenge the information. Now, I know the video was a long time ago, but what you're witnessing in there was the stolen generation in front of your own eyes and the massive destructive impact that it had on really good people everywhere. And this is happening today to children everywhere in Australia at a very alarming rate. Can you share a little bit more about that? And of course, I know you've got that important case coming up tomorrow, so we'll look forward to hearing what you want to share.
Yeah. Ainsley, this is a fundamental thing. People think that the stolen generation stopped, with some amazing speeches from politicians. It's rubbish. They were great speeches written quite often by other people. But the stolen generation is worse now than it ever was. They're ripping more Indigenous children today than ever. Even people that may only have, say, a 16th Indigenous blood in them because the bloodlines are broken down over time. But it's actually happening more than ever, and the current laws in this country are such that the reason the Australian public doesn't know about it is because there's suppression in place that stops parents from talking about it the minute a children removed. So what I highlighted in that video back then, and is incredibly relevant, is the fact that that child in the case with me is an Indigenous child. But notwithstanding that, this is a huge multi-billion-dollar industry. Child trafficking, state-condoned child trafficking is what we call it. And it's very, very real. All the courts in this country are closed courts, children's courts. There'll be one somewhere near most of the people watching this. In my hometown of Newcastle, there's one 10 minutes away. And we're in an open justice system, and they argue that these closed courts are to protect the privacy and identity of children and to protect them from stigma. And I've got 3 things on foot, but there's a High Court thing, and I'll shut up in a moment, Ainsley, to give you a moment to talk, but because I promised you that I would. But you have to understand that what I argued is that fundamentally the 105, the law in New South Wales they use to protect the privacy and identity of a child, actually has a second function. It protects the privacy and identity of the people that remove the children, which is the Department of Out-of-Home Care. This is the same in all the states and territories. So the law they use, and the same in 121 in the family courts, the law they use to purport to protect the privacy and identity of children protects the people that remove the children and the abusers of children from being found. That's the truth, and that's the fundamental issue, and it's a fundamental constitutional issue in this country. That's the facts.
Is that case in that video still ongoing? Has the child been returned to the parents?
That child was returned. It took the family nearly 2 years, and there was multiple court cases, including mine and Andrew's, because we run in multiple jurisdictions. We were taken into the Court of Equity first and suppressed. For Kent and Lance, the Court of Equity, guys, is Ecclesiastes. It's from the Chancery. It was created originally by the entire spiritual end, by the churches. And it was there for a reason, to provide a very, very fundamental purpose. It's being misused. And I don't even think they even know themselves what that court's about now. I've just lost track of your question, Ainsley, so with apologies, because I'm a bit tired.
Oh, that's okay. I know you've been traveling. You've got 3 court cases on at the moment, and you've got definitely one coming up tomorrow. Which was a really, really important case in regard. Is that the Russell Pridgeon case?
It is, yeah. So I just remembered your last question. That child was restored over 3.5 years ago, but Dr. Andrew and I still have suppression on us in the Court of Equity to stop us talking about a child that's long since been returned to his parents. Oh. This is how ridiculous it is. So I'm still suppressed at law. I'm not technically allowed to say his name. I'm in contempt if I do. Meanwhile, if you Google that child's name, you'll find him all over Facebook and all over social media and mainstream media, because they all reported on him, and everyone else is fine to break the law except for Andrew and I. Right. So suppression is still on foot. I couldn't do anything about that. I tried to take that all the way to the High Court, but as you guys may be aware, in this country, when you make an application to the High Court in Australia, it's unique in this country to any other judicial system anywhere on the planet. And it was certainly different to the Westminster system, different to America. But if you try and get into the High Court in this country, you have to seek leave, and the court decides whether or not you can come in. and they don't provide a reason. So they'll just say Pastor Burton, or, you know, Mr. Burton in my case, because they don't like to use your titles when you go in. Mr. Paul Robert Burton, unfortunately, your case has got no prospects of success. And which I write back, well, obviously, because you're not letting me in, you know. But that's the reality. So I've got equity on. I've got a High Court challenge at the moment. I sought special leave. But I'm in a very fortunate position, and this is around what happened with that child removed 5.5 years ago, and that very argument I've mentioned, which is how this same legislation that protects the privacy and identity of children actually protects the privacy and identity of the people that remove children and the abusers of children. That's the fact. So that actually puts the children at much greater risk of harm. That's the argument for the High Court. It's been framed in such a way as to improve its possibility of getting in. It's around the fact that the way the legislation is worded for the common person actually suggests it's a 2-year indictable offence for wishing your own child happy birthday, or, you know, little Johnny did good at the races. It's a 2-year strict liability offence in New South Wales. You can go to jail for 2 years, or in my case, be deported if you're a permanent resident, for saying a child's name on Facebook and wishing them an expression of love. The way the jurisdiction, the way that the law is constructed, an act of love can be a 2-year indictable offence. That's why I took it to the High Court.
Wow.
So that's case one, and I've got senior counsel for the first time in 5.5 years, and I have been represented through my entire case, fighting all their ridiculous fees, doing everything on my own. For the first time ever, I got representation through, I believe, well, grace. I'd have to call it grace. I've got senior counsel, one of the main barristers, and 2 junior counsel and a solicitor, all working pro bono, and that senior barrister was actually the guy that won the implied freedom case in a case called Lange versus the ABC, which is one that was a benchmark case for setting the laws around the implied political freedoms. So I'm in a very good position, and the Attorney General of New South Wales is already opposing it with the Crown Solicitor Karen Smith. So they're already kicking in and fighting it, which means I've got a much better chance of getting in. You can really only get into the High Court if you're a corporation, you've got a lot of money, or your government. You know, very hard to get in otherwise. So High Court, I've got a malicious prosecution also I was charged for 10 offences, 105 court suppression, and also court non-publication orders. 3 of those charges have been dropped against me, and I took out a malicious prosecution. It took me the best part of 4 years. They've absolutely smashed me in the courts, just like Russell Pridgeon. They've made my life absolute hell. They've destroyed everything. They accused me of, they charged me with the child abuse and sex crime squad to try and defame me. They called me an anti-medicine cult leader and, propagated information about me all over the globe. So I got 3 of 10 charges dropped and took out a prosecution against them. So I'm fighting them. So I'm now fighting my defence's attack at the same time. So I've got a malicious prosecution next week against Michael Cooch-Trotter, the former head of DCJ for 10 years, and Lloyd Babb, the former Director of Public Prosecutions in New South Wales. Michael Cooch-Trotter, by his own confession in his Department of Facts, is responsible for the deaths of 1,000 children by their own confession in that 10-year period, about 100 a year. That's just what he compares, not to mention the thousands of children they've removed and the harm they've caused to so many children. And that's next week in Sydney.
Now, Pastor Paul, you've got some of you've sent us some links, which I know are from your website, so we can freely share those links to our audience tonight, and they can go and read up about those on your website.
Absolutely, yeah, paulrobertburton.com. There's also another one that we've got a bit of, mixed stuff from, but it's really interesting. We've got a site, Ainsley, called the New Templars.faith, a very devout Christian friend of mine, Graham Bell, very, very devout Christian, amazing man, who's helped myself and Russell. In fact, without him, I would never have got as far. He's taught me how to do these, how to jump jurisdictions and how to play cricket in the cricket game better than them. And we started a group called the New Templars.faith, which you can find online. The department hate it because it's a fundamental. It's like re-establishing the truest tradition of the Templars, which are spiritual warriors. That we're like the militant arm of God's army, and we're standing our ground on fundamental common law rights and saying you do not let this department in under any circumstances. If they're making up stuff about your children, if they don't have a lawfully sworn warrant, right, and you don't even have to abide by one of them with that if you have a reasonable excuse. But if they don't, you don't let them in under any circumstances because they're building a case to remove your children, and they will.
Can you just give us that website again?
The New Templars, the New Templars.faith, Faith.
Excellent.
Yeah, so and quite a few people are jumping on board, and there's a little blog thing there, and we're doing some kind of little live casting things, small versions of this, just videos we share for people about the cases and information. And the department now, every time they hear Pastor Paul's name or the New Templars, they freak. You know, and they have every reason to too, because we're letting them know in no uncertain terms that if they come near any of our children or grandchildren in our community on my watch, like with no judicial oversight, like none whatsoever, based on hearsay, innuendo and accusations, then we will use all force that's reasonable, up to and including lethal force if absolutely necessary to protect our children. And that's the bottom line we've had to call. I've said that to a number of judges now in the courts, guys. It's got to that point. I said it in the Court of Appeal before Justice Lemmings, Bell and Kirk. And I said to the three of them, you leave me no choice. I said, if you don't decide that what this law is doing and what's happening to these families, if you don't do something about this, you're forcing me into this position. Because that video you guys have seen, all of you have seen, sorry, I mean to call you all guys when I know that there's only two genders and there's a female and males. But let's not go down that rabbit hole. But anyway, rabbits, there's only two genders of rabbits too. But now I've lost track of what I was saying, but it was important. Yeah, that video. Yeah. What happened to me 5.5 years ago with that child is that I negotiated to make sure they didn't separate the family because they were lying about medical information and we all knew it. And they took the child to the hospital, but I allowed that because we weren't going to allow the family to be separated. And upon reflection, I shouldn't have, because once they got into the hospital under the Act, because it's a public hospital, they brought 32 police in close in and we couldn't get in. And that's when they ripped the child, and they ripped it unlawfully, and they knew all the information was wrong. So we lost our power. And it's terrible of me and as a pastor too, but to be honest, if I look back now, knowing all the shit, and I'm going to swear here because I'm angry about this, if I'd known what I'd known now, I would have used all the force that was necessary to protect that child in the premises we were in, because they came into a church too. It was a sacred space, a humble one, but it still was. Right? And I would use all force that's reasonable, and I only wish now, upon reflection, that I did, because if I did, I would have if I'd survived, I would have got a jury trial like any decent person deserves, and I would have been acquitted in minutes, because I was trying to protect an innocent child from a bunch of child-stealing state government maggots. That's the truth.
So, Pastor Paul, if I can say something there, God's got a perfect plan. So as much as you regret what you did what was right. And that was divine, what happened, because you've lived to fight another day. So I think obviously there was a bigger plan for you. You work on the absolute coalface of the biggest crimes undertaken by humanity, right? Have we descended to the lowest point of morality that we can? Or is there still further for these people to go?
I think we have. This is Moloch. I mean, if you guys are believers, of course, you know, this is Moloch. This is the Hebrew Moloch. This is it in action. It's right under everyone's noses. So all these people going off about the children, you know, in tunnels and all this stuff with QAnon and everything. Look, maybe that's going on too. I don't know. But what I do know is that, you know, 15 minutes from where I live, there's a close children's court, and they're ripping these children. And that child you saw ripped, in the time that happened and they've suppressed me, thousands more have been taken. And they're lying about everything, and they're stealing them for profit. It's greed, unbridled greed. And some of these people are abusing those children, some horrifically. They're not all horrifically sexually abused, of course, but they are. They're actually given a mechanism through these protections. The system is set up to protect these people. And I believe, Lance, 100% that we are. I mean, I don't know how much lower it can go, but once a society... Once it doesn't protect its children, like once we get to this point, that's it. You know, God commands us to protect our children. I get goosebumps saying it. You know, like, this is why I'm doing this. He said I have to protect the children. But it's not about me. That, you know, I'm moving on from this place. You know, and the way they're smashing me, I don't know how much time I've got, to be honest. But I'll hang in there. Fortunately, this is not my home. You know.
Kent, just before we move to you, I just want to throw a question in there from one of our listeners, Pastor Paul. Do you know how much money the department makes from removing a child?
Yeah, the Productivity Commission, there's a link on one of my pages. There's a page, if you go down, there's a human rights kind of link down, and you go to important reports. And on that page, there's a Productivity Commission. I put it in there, but there's a link to the Productivity Commission. But under their things with children being removed, the figure was in 2020 to 21 financial year, I think it was, or maybe in the fiscal, maybe in the year, so a 12-month period, 295,000 children in Australia were the subject of some kind of intervention by the departments in all the states and territories. That's 5.1% of all children in this country. They weren't all removed, but they came in, and then the numbers go down for the amount removed. But this is a growing thing, and the amount of monies are astounding. The child, in my case, I said his name I still can't mention, at the time he was removed, he was worth $380,000 a year because he was compromised. He had cerebral palsy. Right, so the more disabled a child is, the more money they're worth. So according to the Productivity Commission, they put the figure per annum for the out-of-home care providers or foster carers, but out-of-home care providers, what we're really dealing with here. They're all privatised, so that payment goes to them straight away. They're already contracted to the department. You're talking about 100 grand to about 220 grand per child per year for a normal child. And then highly compromised children out of home care is about 440 grand to $880,000 per year for each of those children, according to the Productivity Commission. That doesn't include the NDIS funding that they get on top of that and all the other perks and bells and whistles. And that doesn't include every single person along the chain that's profiting. The courts that are profiting, all of them are making a mozza from the removal of these children, the out-of-home care departments, the medical fraternity that are supporting it and all getting paid, the forensic psychologists. This is a massive, massive industry. Massive industry. Massive industry. That's what it is. Yeah. Deprived of any kind of connection with Creator. This is the issue. They've lost touch with God. That's what it is. You know, and as an aside, guys, I'll tell you just really quickly, Court of Equity, I got in the Court of Appeal before Justice McCullum, we got to this point in an argument, and she said, do you believe, because I was arguing, I said that, you can't force, the court can't force a man to go against his conscience before God, and you're in a Court of Equity, you can't do that to me. And she said, do you believe, Pastor Paul, that there's a higher court than this? And I said, of course, Justice McCullum, and so will you when your breathing stops. It's the truth, you know. And we got this argument, and she said, unfortunately, your argument won't hold here because the courts are no longer, we're not spiritual anymore. What's the word? The courts are, like, I've had a moment because I'm tired. I normally don't. I'm normally pretty sharp. Secular. The courts are secular. And I said, well, that's really interesting. I said my Latin or French, whatever, I think it's my French is pretty not that good, but down the bottom there's this huge singular, and it said something like Dieu et mon droit, which translates as God and my right. I said, so at the bottom of the law court building you say God and my right, and then when I finally get to the top of the building you say we don't recognize God. I said, to me that's, I think there's a certain degree of hypocrisy in that. I think you'd have to agree.
Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah. Look, one of the questions I was going to ask, we've just covered, so that's perfect. Are you allowed to, I'll go on to the next one. Are you allowed to explain to us about Operation Noetic and what that actually was?
Yeah, no, okay, moving on. I think that's important because this is tomorrow. You know, my malicious prosecution's next week, but I'm up here in Brisbane to support Patrick O'Day, Russell Pridgeon, Anne Greer, grandmother, and another lady called Ariel Johnson, another grandmother. She's about 80, beautiful old lady. Now, I can talk about that case. I can't identify the children because of 121 family law, court laws and everything else, but I'm going to tell you about that case, and I have every right to, because in the interest of open justice, this is a criminal matter. So, yeah, so that case, brief background for anyone that doesn't know, it's about 4.5 years ago. Those gentlemen, Patrick O'Day and Russell Pridgeon specifically, and those other parents and grandparents, were accused of being part of an international child trafficking syndicate. There was claims made that Russell had multiple passports overseas, millions of dollars, he had a boat, and that he was stealing children with people and shunting them out of the country. And it all went all over the media. They decimated him. They took away his medical license for no reason, destroyed him. He got solicitors, as barristers as he did. He lost thousands of dollars, lost his home, lost everything. Patrick, who made his money from international travel, couldn't do any of that anymore. They smashed these guys. And it turned out that none of that was true. Right, he had a boat, but he'd been working as a doctor, so he'd finally saved up 70 grand and bought a boat. Whoopee-doo. Right, but everything else, multiple passports, rubbish, money overseas, none. He couldn't even get Centrelink. He couldn't even get Centrelink. Right, he couldn't even get money to defend himself. And it turned out that these people were in fact two wonderful South Africans. One guy that's ex-military, been in the Rhodesian army, Patrick, blown up by 4 landmines. He's an amazing man, seen some shocking things in his life, highly PTSD from dealing with immense trauma and war. Beautiful, kind-hearted human beings. And Russell, who basically were helping a couple of parents and a grandparent who were fleeing with their children to protect those children from sexual abuse, because those children had made really significant disclosures of sexual abuse, and the family court had failed them and returned those children to the sexual predators. And that's a fact.
Am I correct in understanding that Operation Noetic was a police operation, an Australian federal police operation?
Federal police, yes.
Where they tried to group all of these people together in a syndicate. And it's been, am I also correct in understanding that it's absolutely been proven in court that many of these people had never even met each other?
Never met. They didn't know each other. Yeah, they didn't even know each other. Anne Greer, the grandmother, had lawful custody of her grandchild awarded by the court. She was on her way back to court when they arrested her. This is nuts. You know, and I've seen the testimony of her grandchild. I've seen it and I believe it. Like, they've been charged at the moment as conspiracy to defeat justice is what's left. You know, heaps of the charges have been dropped thanks to the wonderful work of Graham Bell, who I told you is a divinely inspired man who just helps people selflessly. He's an amazing guy, spirit. You know, God sent this one to me, I can assure you. It's nuts, Ken. Like I've looked at this, 42 independent reports. They're hiding the abuse of the children from the courts because this is the problem with this adversarial system. Unlike some countries in Europe, which is an inquisitorial system, the adversarial system is designed to block getting the evidence in. So the CDPP and Operation Noetics that were running this, over 60 police involved. They argue it's the largest case in Australian criminal history, and it's a mockery. This is not a case. This is persecuting a little old lady, a grandma and a couple of parents who children clearly disclosed sexual abuse. 42 independent reports, like 2 of them in particular, I won't go into detail, but, genital herpes, bleeding from the anus. Like, come on, seriously? Shocking reports, and all from all different people, a bunch of independent people that did interviews with these children that all went AWOL as well. They all reported to the family court at the time that they believed what the mother was saying. But no, they just keep on hounding these people, hounding, trying to run this absolutely bullshit case that has no merit whatsoever.
Now, it sounds to me as if this information could suggest to a person with sound reasoning and being of a sane mind, all this information could suggest that that institutions which in the past actually used to have a small amount of integrity, at least some integrity, it seems they've been so infiltrated by people who are so keen to make a dollar any way they possibly can, that they've infiltrated. And mate, where are they? I mean, I could fill a book, several books with stories of infiltration into the Queensland Police Service, and the corruption that exists inside the Queensland Police Service in every level of the running of that organisation. Have you had any dealings with the Queensland Police? And
fortunately for me, no. New South Wales Police. Fortunately not. I'm dealing in the New South Wales system. I'm struggling with the degrees of corruption that exist in that, and trust me, there's a lot of that too. I wouldn't have a malicious prosecution otherwise. But Queensland is a whole new level of pain again. Like what we've seen these people do, they've broken every rule in the book. And I even think tomorrow's case. I mean, we're meeting down there from 9 outside the. It's 415 George Street. It's the Brisbane District Court and Supreme Court are in the same building. We're meeting down there at 9. The case runs from 10. We think they're going to try and adjourn tomorrow because they've been pushing this thing through. What's happened? There was actually 8 people involved, and they've broken it now into 2 trials after 4.5 years because 4 of them are unrepresented and 4 are represented is what happened. And the unrepresented people that we were helping 3 of those 4. The Ariel Johnson's 80. She doesn't want anything to do with the court. Her husband's dying. She said, I'm with my friends here, but you guys just sort it out because I can't be bothered anymore. Little old grandmother, it's ridiculous. So anyway, they've broken it into 2 cases. So now, and the reason they did it was taking so long to get to trial because we were fighting left, right and centre because everything we could challenge, we did. But they're blocking stuff and you know, we made an application, the committal, everything in their process, they haven't followed any of their statutory obligations. They've in fact changed the particulars. They've even changed the charges. First, they charged them with abducting children. Then they changed it from harbouring. Now they've just changed it to conspiracy to defeat justice for stopping the court doing what it could. Then when they realised nothing they did stop the court from doing what it could, because it all went ahead anyway, now it's to conspiring to defeat justice for something they might do in the future. But they're just making this shit up as they go. It's nuts.
What, for thought crimes or something?
Well, literally, yeah. I mean, conspiracy to defeat justice is a really interesting one because you've got to conspire and there's all of these ingredients there, but you've got to defeat justice as one of the elements of that charge, and you've got to prove the elements, particularly with a criminal matter. You've got to prove it beyond reasonable doubt. Now, and here are these people, and their argument is a very simple one. You've got to actually, the prosecution has a right to actually. They've got to question or have evidence for what they call the reasonable and alternative hypothesis. There's a thing, and in this case, it's very simple, that these people truly believed that these children were being abused. Now, I've seen the videos, I believe it. Now, this case, strange enough, is not arguing about whether or not the children were abused. This is just conspiracy to defeat justice now. So this is like the real elephant in the room. So meanwhile, these children are still being abused. They've been returned to the perpetrators of abuse, and they're not the only ones. There's others too in the family court. This is the level of disgrace. So they're being criminalised for trying to protect children. Now, even if they were wrong, and even if those children lied, taking the prosecution's argument at its highest, I don't believe it, because it's very hard for the children at this age group that I've looked at these videos and those reports I've seen. I cannot believe you can't make up some of the shocking things I said before, right? It's not possible.
It's a terrible thing to say that a child's been bleeding from the anus, but
absolutely.
I mean, you can't make that up. I mean,
no, and genital herpes too, two of them, come on, please, So what's going on there, and the reports, I did say this is hearsay and people are struggling with it, and I have to be very careful because I will have to say this is hearsay, but I heard from a very well-respected solicitor I know, I will not name him, there was a whistleblower in this case, and they reckon in regards to 2 of the children that were interviewed, because it's going back a long way now, some of this matter, when these children, this was about one mother who ran away with 2 children and hid for 4 years successfully. And they've got her and they returned the children back to the perpetrator of abuse. But it was reported by one person, at least, that I know, to that solicitor, that one of those children identified a former prime minister, right? And that father was sharing those children with a lot of very important people. And that would make a lot of sense if it were true as to why they're persecuting these people so much. I don't know if that's true. Having said that, guys, the other thing is too, whether it's an important public officer or not, it doesn't matter. These are children being abused, they're disclosing abuse. It doesn't really matter at the end of the day. This is a really shocking thing. You should not persecute people for protecting children. Same with me, in my case. That's how Russell and I became friends. I saw what they did to him. I got persecuted and I saw what they did to him as well. And I felt for him and I knew what it was like, and I knew he was innocent too.
Pastor Paul, sorry, Kent, just a quick question from our listener again, not a racist question or anything like that, but they're just wanting to know that the cases that you're seeing with these children, are they mainly for Indigenous children or are they white children?
No. This one's not. No, with Russell preaching, no, definitely not. There may be one, I'm not entirely sure, but to be honest, but no. You've got to understand that for, like I said, 230 years, the abuse of the Indigenous, it's been going on for a long time. This is why I've got all those reports on my website, the Families Culture Review and all those others, because the shocking outcomes of Indigenous youth and, Indigenous in care and incarceration, there's a reason for that. It's not because they're bad people, it's because it's an intergenerational genocide. They've been ripped from their families, then their children are ripped from them. And even today, they're ripping those children from Indigenous families because they were taken from their families. You're flagged by the department. They rip children off a mother that will disclose she was raped. If a mother says she was raped by an uncle, they'll take her children off of her. You get absolutely targeted if you're a victim. This is what happens. And the net's growing wider. It used to be just the black fellas in this country, and they don't mind me saying that. I've hung out with the mob a lot. That's okay, right? But this is not just that was the case. The good news in this, as terrible it is because the net's spreading wider. So there's a lot more. There were minority groups, Filipinos, Macedonians, out northwest Adelaide. Parramatta region out there. That's targeting a lot of those groups because they're migrant families. So they target low socioeconomic and migrant groups, but it's going upstream, and this industry needs children for money. So like any business, it's growing and it's lost. It's like the money goes up like this and the morality and ethics rolls down like this, and the other way, until you get the situation which is just Moloch, pure unbridled greed and self-interest, ripping children for profit, and some people abusing them.
And I guess when they take away these children, these Aboriginal children in particular, from their mothers and their tribes, and they're separated for so long, they don't actually grow up then knowing all about their culture and their history and their songlines, which for them is so very important as we're finding when we're building these sovereign nations or helping them, create these sovereign nations. That cultural history is so very, very important.
Yeah, it's a form of cultural genocide. I actually said that in the court too. I said, in my view, I think the Children and Young Persons Care and Protection Act is a genocide act because the paramountcy principles are what the argument purports to run, and the paramountcy principles are you leave the child with the family at all costs and you don't do anything unless it's absolutely necessary. And if you do remove that child, you make sure it goes to the next of kin or the next closest family member. You maintain all their spiritual and cultural connections. That's what they purport to do. But under what's called the permanent placement principles in the Act, they remove the children as a first course action. So what we're seeing now is some vindictive ex can report and say their ex-husband or ex-wife, doesn't really matter what way round, played with little Johnny's willy, and that's a flag for the department, and in no time they can be in and they start doing their investigation, and they can, without any evidence whatsoever and without delegated authority too, it's all unlawful, come and rip children. And this is what's happening, and the public don't know about it because of these suppression laws and the closed children's courts. You can't get in there.
It's almost like telemarketing for child trafficking.
It's exactly what it is. There was a case, Kent, a shocking case down in Victoria about 2.5 years ago, and there was a bunch of actually really, really disgusting pedophiles got together, and they formed an out-of-home care agency, right? And then they managed to get a bunch of children, and they were making pornos with those kids, and they were getting paid by the government to do it. That's true. That's a true case. It was 2.5 years ago. I'll find it for you. But this is the actual reality. Now, I'm not saying that happens all the time, but this is what you're dealing with. One other example in New South Wales, Challenge Agency, which is one of these agencies that looks after these children. A senior representative for Challenge for the accountant department went to work for Fax, as they were called then, DCJ. Then they set up an agreement without tender so that when Fax remove the children, they give them to the Challenge Agency because it's 100% privatised. So when they remove children, they've got to give them straight to the agency. And that organisation alone on the ACNC, you can go and check it out, Challenge Agency. They went from about $4 million in 2014 to 86 million now. And I had reports from some of my Koori mates out there, Mick Horn and other people that I know, and Sam Connolly, some other really good, because I was hanging out with the black fellas out there and helping them protect the land at one point, doing my environmental work. But we had reports where they were hitting them, ripping 20 kids in a weekend from areas, regional areas, out Barorin way, Walgett and that stuff, and they're doing it for profit. That's how I got involved with this department. One of the reasons they loathe me is because Auntie Mimi, who began the Grandmothers Against Removals, Elizabeth Humble, she's passed away now, and Hazel started the Grandmothers Against Removals. And when I met her, I was helping protect sacred sites from Whitehaven Coal when they were decimating all the Indigenous sites. And she had 2 children, and she hadn't seen one of them for 6 months, and the other one she got 2 hours a month if she was lucky. And I said to her, I made her a promise I'd help her get some contact with her kids and help her get her kids back because she's a beautiful woman. I stayed in her house and said, Auntie, I can't see how come you don't have your children with you? This is wrong. You make beautiful food. Your house is great. Sam's great. I help you get your kids back. And I made her a promise. She's a devout Christian. We used to read the Bible together. I didn't realize what I was getting into. That was before stuff happened with me. That was back in late 2015, 2016. And one of those children when I went into that meeting was actually in one of those cases I was dealing with, was actually had a nappy and she was 11.5 years old and she was wetting herself. And I said, geez, she must have been, like, something must be happening. She's either been abused in care or she was abused in care, or there's a very weak argument for poor diet. And after I raised it to the Family and Community Services, the head caseworker disappeared. The caseworker looking after the case disappeared. Their casework manager for Tamworth disappeared. And they started a blinding attack on me. And I found where that child was. That child was in a house in Armidale with a woman that was getting paid to look after 5 children. And she was actually bonking, excuse the better word, but that's the truth, a guy that was working for security for one of the mining companies who had a sexual abuse history with children. So I believed that guy was most probably abusing those children, and she had 5 of them and she was getting all the money for it. That's the truth. This is what's going on. People have no idea how bad it is.
Paul, in 1997, as a police officer, I won't say where, I executed a warrant lawfully to remove a 15-year-old boy from the care of a 42-year-old woman that he had a child with. He fathered the child with the 42-year-old so-called carer, the mother.
Okay. Yeah.
I felt that was, as a police officer, I felt that was an improper place for him to be. The Department of Family Services placed him back in that house within 48 hours, and there was nothing I could do about it after executing a lawful warrant. And I was basically told, look, you're pushing it uphill. It's pointless you trying to do that. By the bosses, I was told, we know you're trying to do a good thing, but, you're just going to get stopped by Department of Family Services. That was back then, okay? And these people who tried to defend children get attacked and destroyed. And it's very interesting to me that the known pedophiles who get paid by the government to make pornos with children, I'll bet you any money we can't even find out their names. So they're going to attack you, who's trying to save children, but the pedos who are making pornos with children and being paid for by the government, their names are going to be suppressed and protected.
Yeah, that's exactly why I'm going to the High Court now, and that's what I'm arguing. That's what it's about. Because that's what they're doing with the law, This is
ridiculous. We've got to turn this around as a people, as a nation. We've got to start standing up for all of this together.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So I'm going to ask everyone who hears this to continue donating to your cause. I noticed that on one of your sites there is a donation. There's the ability to donate.
I appreciate that, Ken. I never promote that kind of anything as much. We've raised a few grand for Russell, but the council, he tried to get one to charge, I think, 30. We don't have them now. We've got a solicitor only, and he fortunately, unbelievable. I mean, this is grace again. He had a message come through from the Commonwealth Bank about 6 weeks ago where we're trying to fundraise, because he was on his ass, seriously. He's actually working as a doctor next door to me in the Ubuntu Wellness Clinic in Newcastle, because we're helping him. So he's got a bit of work again, and he's back registered, so he's doing great work. But the Commonwealth Bank contacted him, and they said they found $30,000 of undisclosed super. And he phoned me up and he said, I think it's one of those prank emails. It wasn't. So he got 30 grand out of nowhere at the time we just started the fundraiser. And we were like, we put this thing, said we need about 30 grand to do this. And we didn't want to hire counsel, but Russell's been smashed. You have to understand, he's a very beautiful man, but I'm more assertive. I spent many years as a musician, guys, so I can kind of assert and I can run my case and do stuff. Russell struggles. He's such a kind man that they just railroad him. And it's so frustrating when you're self-represented trying to help these people when they just don't know, they get smashed. So we had to get money for him. So yes, I do have a fundraiser, and if people contribute, that money's, so I've actually got a fundraiser for Russell on there, which closes tomorrow, which was for this thing tomorrow on a page. And there's one just for me as well. And I said, I don't make a big song and dance about that, but 100% of that money, I'm 100% transparent. I keep a record of every payment in there. It goes into a completely separate account, and I use all of that money just for what we're doing.
Yep.
You know? And remember, I mean, I've spent nearly $1,000 just to get here. Karen and I, this is $115 this room, but we couldn't get anything else. We had to be near the court. I got flights for I think $95 each, and one person didn't have extra baggage, $70. So, we don't spend anything we don't have to, Yeah. And just to get Karen in here and get people and a couple other people I paid because we wanted support for these people here,
All right, ladies and gentlemen.
Even if it's just a coffee.
Yeah.
Even if it's just a coffee.
Ladies and gentlemen, if this is tugging at your heartstrings and this is a cause that you want to definitely get behind Pastor Paul with this, please go to his website, paulrobertburton.com. It is in the chat box. Paul Robert Burton, burton.com. You can go to the fundraiser page. You'll see there's a lot of drop down menus there, and you'll be able to support Pastor Paul in the work that he's doing, supporting all these people in these cases. Pastor Paul, how your case tomorrow, is that a closed court hearing, or can people?
No, tomorrow's open. Tomorrow's an open court. What they'll generally do is, if the names of children are mentioned, they'll try and close the court if there's any threat of that. But in this case, because the arguments are technical in nature, there may be mention about child abuse in it, but no, it's open. We're a little concerned that they're going to try and adjourn it, but they can't do that before. It's still going ahead tomorrow. A lot of people have travelled. I'm actually meeting some people for the first time. The grandmother I've been helping for 3.5 years, Graham, a little longer than me, and Greer, I'm actually meeting her in person for the first time. So I've been on the phone for hours with this lady, helping with all of our stuff for court and, running her arguments. She's such a great, she's real working class, and trying to say, calm down, Anne, you can't call them all bastards, like I understand how you feel, but guiding her through. So I'm meeting her. So there's going to be quite a wonderful union of souls tomorrow. And I think, when two or more gather, I think we need to get together. And I think no matter what happens tomorrow, it's going to be really interesting to see, and there's a lot of mojo and energy around this spiritual energy. And I think with what you guys are all doing too, it's amazing. I've had it since the first time. I think it was Kent. I can't remember if it was Kent or Lance. I saw one of you guys talking somewhere. I think it was you, Kent, on a little video just at the beginning of COVID somewhere. And I watched this guy, an ex-policeman. And I've got some good friends in the fixated person units that have helped save my ass, actually. So, and I saw you talking, and I got spirit moved, and I just get the goosebumps, I call it, because I just know I get the chicken skin thing, they call it in Europe. But once I get that, and that spirit to me, that's like the Holy Ghost. I just said, this guy's on the money, and I just knew it straight away intuitively. And I knew at that point in time that I was destined to connect with you guys somewhere.
Yeah.
In this
I think
journey.
that's how I started, Paul, as well. I saw Kent. I think it was you, Kent. Same.
Yeah, well, there you go. See those catalysts that occur just in media when one person moved by spirit speaks, and this is how it works. And there is a much, much greater force at work, and it's an incredible play unfolding here. So I'm really thankful to be on this side of the fence with people like yourselves. And I think anyone else here that's supporting are good people, and they're on this side, and I said I have a holistic view of Creator, coming from the Vedanta movement. I only believe, if somebody says, "Oh, what religion are you?" I say, "Well, there is only one," and it confuses them because there's only one nameless, formless, imperishable absolute, but I have a very broad view. So it's like, well, you can really call it what you want, but it's only the one thing. Like your personal journey connecting with it's your business, but providing you believe and you try and honor those codes of conduct, or make some kind of effort and recognizing as human beings what we have to do and how difficult it is to walk in truth, and how difficult it is to deal with our attachments and all of our energies and our struggles. And look at what happens here with these people with their complete loss of control with lust, when they're actually, now it's becoming like normal to have sex with children. Like they want to normalize that, and this disgusting thing with the woke movement and all that stuff. This is disgraceful what's happening. And I've got gay friends, and I'm okay with that. Like if they're consenting adults, that's their business. I'm not attached to any of that stuff. God says, judge not, lest ye be judged. But this woke stuff, where there's all ridiculous agendas, I have to say, and I hate to distract you guys, but I was in a children's court, actually Surrey Hills Children's Court in Sydney, helping a lady, and another woman come up, and I've become a bit like a kind of a weird kind of rock star in a children's court. I'm the only person in there just about, and a parent will come up and say, "Oh, Pastor Paul, I saw you on Facebook," and they'll want to unload and tell me their stories, and I like to listen if I can and support. Anyway, this woman had a son taken off her, and she was in court because she was trying to get the court to bring some attention to it, because her 6-year-old son was struggling because Chris, who was looking after her, the full-time carer that this child had been given to, was now becoming Mia, and the 6-year-old was struggling with it. So they're giving a 6-year-old to a transitioning adult. I'm just sharing.
Kidding me.
I'm not kidding. Another case with 3 generations naval family. Right, this is amazing. I can't go into details again. This poor family, they destroyed it. The woman comes off the Pacific on a naval operation. She gets pregnant to a guy, gets caught in COVID, has a child. She has a bit of a depressive breakdown. She gets busted for a mid-range drink driving offence. She didn't have an accident, just over the limit, with the child in the car. And then some neighbour reported some noise. They ripped that child off her. They didn't give it to the grandmother or the grandfather, who was a Vietnam vet. or anyone else in the family, they're all quite capable. They gave it to a gay couple, the child, and they can't get him back, and they still haven't. This is a 3 generations Newcastle family that they've actually fought for this country. Right? These are like military naval officers that fought for this country, and this is what they're doing to these people in those Star Chamber closed children's courts. This is I've seen these cases, firsthand.
When you look at all the indicators here, they're not interested in the child's welfare. They're interested in the money. They're interested in passing that child around like a party toy. So it is an industry. It is Moloch. When you look at the transgender agenda, that's all about Moloch. We live in a time with the lowest morality. I keep checking for a big flood coming. Honestly, I'm thinking about getting a heap of wood and building a boat, guys.
I thought about it.
We're in for some heat. If we cannot fix this situation, and I do not believe we can repair this broken system, I think we've got to tear it down to the foundations, absolute foundations, and rebuild it, because these people will continue until they're stopped. And there's only one way to stop people like this, and that's to remove them from decent society altogether. They can't be part of it. We can't help people that are so broken. You can't fix them. They're just, forget about super glue. It's not going to work.
Oh yeah, I tend to agree. I mean, I've always tried to run the argument, and still do. I kind of hang on to that semblance of the highest democratic principles that, maybe there is some hope. But I'm now like hanging for that one decent judge in all of them. That's what we've become now. So it's like, it's just, and the amount of work I've had to do in 5.5 years. I actually quoted it when I've just put in this malicious prosecution, and it's the truth, guys. But I've actually written, I reckon, something close to the size of the King James Bible in submissions over the last 5.5 years. I could show you the amount of stuff and helping all these families. They just work you to the bone, like just writing stuff and dragging you down into their quagmire of rubbish, trying to prove this and prove that, and dragging you down, this rabbit hole of nothing. Meanwhile, these children are being abused, and it's continuing. And I think, in my view, I don't think there'd be anything worse than having a child taken and you knowing that the child was with a perpetrator of abuse, that child was being abused. I think that'd be worse than dealing with a dead child, to be honest. Certainly worse than being incarcerated. I think it's one of the most heinous, disgusting things that could ever happen to somebody, and to somebody to be subjected to that kind of horror and have to deal with that, the child and the parent. That's the worst kind of torture there is. Yet these things are actually being initiated by social workers without any delegated authority, no judicial oversight, and they can just do whatever the shit they want. That's the truth. It's just disgraceful.
There was a guy recently on social media, and he called himself the pedophile hunter. And all he would do was put his little story out and attract the pedophiles. And these guys were invariably known to the police, and in a lot of cases live very close to the police stations. And the police would come and move him along and protect the pedophile.
Yeah, it's just nuts.
And when the pedophiles are put in public, I mean, in New South Wales alone, there is over 50,000 registered child sex offenders in New South Wales alone, and that's registered one, guys.
I didn't even realise it was that much. I knew it was a lot, but even that's astounding.
It's that much. And if you then registered all the people that should be on it, you're probably looking double that scenario, because none of the elites are on there.
No.
None of the politicians are on there. None of the police, clergy, the judiciary, none of these are on there. And so you start adding these numbers in, and we've got a pandemic, and this is a real pandemic, and they're destroying these children's lives, which in turn destroys society.
Yeah,
and then
absolutely.
we've got these other problems that are created that go further and further along. It's like soldiers get PTSD, and we see that. We see these rational people become wholly irrational and start swearing and carrying on like complete imbeciles. PTSD. But how bad is it for a child? I can't even imagine what it's like.
No, it's just this is a thing, and I had to kind of live with this every week. And this is, I think, why we're just so smashed. You know, Russell's kind of, I mean, I'm hanging in. I'm lucky. I've got spirit keeps me. I said I'm feeling a bit flat because it's been just so much work in the last preparing for these cases coming up. I'll recover as always, but the spirit always drives me and empowers me to continue this work, because it's always been my case of that. This is about the children. You've got to do this. You cannot allow this to continue. We have to do something, and we have to stand. We have to exercise our God-given rights, our fundamental common law rights too. People need to really empower themselves. Stop doing this nanny state rubbish of just letting these people in uniforms come in, right? Not if they don't have any kind of oversight. We don't have to do that. And people need to really start learning those laws. Put up your trespass signs. It's unfortunate, but that's what we've become. Don't let this department in. Once they take that child, you've got diddly squat chance of getting that child back. And then I'm not going to do that. Like, they're not going to go near my kids or grandkids or any in our community. You know, and we've got a very good and righteous community. Our community of the Ubuntu, some of us are some good males, great females, really good group of people, but we'll protect each other. And we're lucky because we have community. You know, I mean, you'll be aware too, they're breaking community down. They target single mums and really vulnerable people that are victims. That's how they get these children.
And if we don't stamp this out now, if we don't stamp this out in this generation or the next generation, what is it going to be like 10, 20, 30, 40 years from now? What type of society are we going to be if we don't nip this in the bud now?
I'm not living with it. I'd rather kind of I'm going to do what's righteous and right to do, because this ultimately is not my home. I think this is a spiritual war. You have to make the choice. Yeah, it's very simple. You've got to make that choice. We've all made that choice. It's very clear. I can tell, even talking to you guys, because I get spirit moved from me. I can tell people's energies. Creator lets me know where someone's coming from. It's very easy. Yeah. You guys can feel it too. You know.
Yeah. We can feel it, and it's what guides our lives daily. I see the amount of work and the dedication that Ainsley puts in. Lance has been a magnificent spiritual leader for me. And every single person working in the Australia Project, Triple Tap, and also I want to say this: the magnificent work being done by the Birri Gubba Nation, that has been done by the Yidinji Nation, and that has been done by the Githibal Ngarakbal Nation. And these are our Aboriginal, Australian Aboriginal sovereigns who are standing up, creating nations that are recognised internationally, who are moving outside of control of the bullshit Australian federal government, and it is a bullshit government. So many of our common law people around Australia they know, and they've proven that it's a bullshit government. They're only there by power and by force. The more we wake everyone up, the great work that you're doing, Pastor Paul, highlights how urgent this work is. The carpenter said, "Woe unto those who hurt my little ones," right? And that's what these mongrels are doing. They are hurting our little ones. I got asked to go and work as become a detective in the crime squad in Brisbane City when I was still working for the Queensland Police Service, because I had the type of service and credentials that they wanted for men and women who were asked to work in that area. I told them I would go, but I refused to work in the child sex crimes portion. And they said, "No, you'll have to do that." And I said, "Look, I won't be, because if you put me across the table from someone who has," look, I won't say what I said, but if you put me across the table from someone who's done that to a child, I'm gonna pull out my service clock, and I'm gonna send them straight to God. And like I just want to say, I'm kidding, I'm joking. I never would have done that, but really I would have. Okay.
As an important aside, Kent, there's a story in 1994, a gentleman called Sed Morgan, well-documented case. I don't want the public to know, but Sed Morgan actually was tracking down a well-identified pedophile guy that was abusing a number of children, female children, I believe, at least 3. It was a no-brainer. The guy who did it, he was 100% guilty. Sed got him and some other good police doing their job, locked him up. He didn't get as much time as he deserved, is what happens a lot. I think he got a few years. Well, that particular gentleman threatened Sed Morgan, and he said, "When I get out, mate, I'm going to rape your kids too." Right? And he kept going. Said, anyway, that guy got out of jail. Said Morgan drove round to his house and shot him through the forehead. He went to a jury trial and he got acquitted in 32 minutes.
I know the case.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I got the maths right. I may have not been right. I don't know if they shot him through the head. I kind of got creative for that moment because I don't know the exact details. So if you know the case real well, you might want to pull me up on the thing. But he definitely killed him.
So he emptied his revolver into his chest and there was a shot in the head.
Okay, thank you. Well, there you go. But there's a landmark case. But this is what I said. So when they come for our children, our grandchildren, I don't want to have to. I'm not condoning violence because the Bible and my own spiritual teachers know that's not what I'm saying. Fundamental common law. I use all force that's reasonable up to and including lethal force if absolutely necessary to protect our children. So if you don't have any right or justification and you don't have a warrant and you don't have any evidence and you're coming to pull a child for profit, I know you are, like they did in the case of me 5.5 years ago. That's what we're going to do.
Yeah,
that's exactly what we're going to do.
But that is not violence. Self-defense and protection of people under your responsibility is not violence. If you take their life, if you're forced to take their life,
that's the only thing that's going to stop them.
Yeah,
I'll tell you what that is. That is an appropriate use of force taken directly from the police use of force model. It is self-defense. And that never, ever could be misconstrued lawfully or properly by a court as incitement to violence. I want it clear to everyone who's listening. We, all of us here, believe in obeying, honouring and sustaining the law. We do not believe in the incitement of violence. And we most definitely believe, like all honourable people do, in the protection of children. And I'm right there with you, Pastor. I am absolutely prepared to throw my life on the line to protect little children from scumbag sexual offenders, whether they wear uniforms, whether they pound a gavel, whether they're a friggin' politician. I'll stand there right with you shoulder to shoulder, mate, and I'll be proud to do it.
No, and me too with you, Ken. And that was part of what we did with you Templars.faith. That was asking people to join that group. We don't have many. There's only a few. We said we're not looking for lots of numbers, but we said anyone who wants to be a member of our New Templars. And we're not attached even to that. It's more the principle of what you're sharing. You know, you're New Templar Plus, brother. You're already there. Like, you don't have to join nothing. You know, like you don't need to. You know, even God said that you don't have to join any group anywhere. You know, you only have to recognize the supreme being and follow the codes and covenants. That's all that's required.
All right, guys.
But
We are out of time, guys. So, Pastor Paul, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. I'm thrilled to hear that you were talking about equity because that's what I've been studying for the last 18 months. So that's really good that you bring back that onto the radar. And look, ladies and gentlemen, if this tugged at your heartstrings like it did mine, I unfortunately wasn't blessed to be a mother, but the stories that you share and the stories and the atrocities that I hear out there tugs at my heartstrings as if I was a mother. And ladies and gentlemen, if you would like to support Pastor Paul, please go again to his website, paulrobertburton.com. We will put the links when we put up the replay. Do what you can to help Pastor Paul. And if you are in the area, in the Brisbane area, please go to the court tomorrow. Again, it's on the website, and support Pastor Paul and all the amazing work that he is doing to help protect the children of our nation. So once again, Pastor Paul, thank you so much for
Can I just make a abnormal request for how we run these meetings? Is that if you feel comfortable, Pastor Paul, if you could finish this meeting with a prayer, how would you feel about that?
Yeah, I'd be more than happy to. I think, when two or more gather together in God's name, it's really important. We're powerful here and we're a very strong group. But what I might do? Can I do a prayer in music?
You can.
I'll just, because I think that's most probably the way, and it might get a little bit loud with this microphone, but I'm just gonna do a little prayer. So we'll pull into the space together, and just give power and strength to Russell Pridge and Patrick O'Day, Anne Greer, Errol Johnson tomorrow, all the other amazing individuals out here that are standing up. I know Laura Dell and heaps of others fighting this draconian, evil, sick, Moloch-driven system, and all the good people out there that are standing up and recognizing righteousness and truth together. As God is our witnesses together, we're going to bring about the positive change on this planet as He commands us to do. It commands us to do. Let's not even get caught in genders here. And using that power together, I'll play just a little, very simple little ocarina piece, and we'll hold space. And hopefully I'll get it right while I'm so tired.
Sure.
God bless you.
Thank
Amen.
you, Pastor Paul. That was amazing.
And God bless you all too. Thank you. You keep doing what you're doing
Yeah.
too. And I really appreciate knowing you're on this planet at this time, because it's so good to know you're not alone.
Yeah. Amen.
Thank
Amen.
you.
Excellent.
Amen.
Thank you, everybody,
See you
for
there.
joining us. And
All
we'll
right.
see you next time on Triple Tap. Bye for now.
Thanks.